shark attacks in North Carolina.
This morning, new warnings about dangers in the water.
Shark bite, not conscious, breathing.
When asked what the deadliest shark is to humans, most people will say the great white. The lasting influence of the iconic scenes from Jaws, like this one, reinforced by news reports, helps keep that species of shark at the top of mind when one considers the world's most fearsome predators. But it is in situations like these that we need to be careful of letting survivorship bias affect our decision making. Survivorship bias refers to the idea that we get a false representation of reality when we base our understanding only on the experiences of those who live to tell their story. Taking a look at how we misrepresent shark attacks highlights how survivorship bias distorts reality in other situations. Now, before we drill down into some interesting stats, it's important to understand that great whites are only one member of a class of sharks with many common characteristics. Great whites are closely related to tiger and bull sharks. They all have similar habitats, physiology, and instincts, and they're also very large with an average size of over 10 feet long. Tiger and bull sharks also rarely attack humans, and to someone being bit by one of these huge creatures, there isn't that much of a difference between them. The Florida Museum's International Shark Attack File explains that positive identification of attacking sharks is very difficult since victims rarely make adequate observations of the attacker during the heat of the interaction. The fatality rate in known attacks is 21.5% for the bull shark, 16% for the great white, and 26% for the tiger shark. But in sheer volume, attacks attributed to great whites outnumber the other two species 3-1, so there are 3 times as many survivors to tell the story of their attack. When it comes to our picture of reality of the most dangerous shark, there are other blind spots. Not all sharks have the same behaviors as those 3, such as swimming close to the shore and being around enough prey to develop a preference for fat seals versus very bony humans. Pelagic sharks live in the open ocean and have to eat pretty much whatever they can find. The oceanic white tip is a pelagic shark that is probably far more dangerous to humans, but we just don't come in contact with them as often, so we don't think they are. There are only 15 documented attacks by an oceanic white tip, with 3 of those being fatal. But since most attacks occur in the open ocean in more isolated situations, like a couple of people on a boat versus 500 people swimming at a Florida beach, we really have no idea how dangerous oceanic white tips are. There could be hundreds of undocumented attacks that left behind no survivors to tell the tale. One famous survivor story gives us a glimpse of how dangerous oceanic white tips might be. In 1945, a Japanese submarine shot down the USS Indianapolis, and for a multitude of reasons, partly due to the fact that the Indianapolis was on a top secret mission, and partly due to just tragic incompetence, a rescue ship was not sent for 4 days. Those who survived the ship sinking had to then survive in the open ocean with little gear until rescue arrived, and the water was full of sharks.
But the sharks were and they attacked in groups. When they died, I just cut them loose from the group and let them float out to sea.
The sharks in the ocean that day were to believe to have been oceanic white tips. It's unknown just how many men died from shark attacks because many also died to exposure, dehydration, injury, and just pure exhaustion. Of the 1,195 crewmen originally aboard the ship, only 316 survived. The story of the USS Indianapolis is a rare, brutal case that provides a unique picture of the potential dangers of the oceanic white tip. Our estimation of the shark that could do us the most harm is often formed by survivorship bias. We develop an inaccurate picture based on the stories of those who live to tell the tale of their shark attack. We don't ask ourselves, well, who didn't survive, and so we miss out on the information we need to build an accurate picture of reality. The point is not to shift our fear from great white sharks to oceanic white tips. The point, rather, is to consider how well you make decisions when you only factor in the stories of the survivors. For example, if you were to try to reduce the instances of shark attacks, or just try to limit their severity, you will not likely get the results you are after if you only pay attention to survivor stories. You need to ask who didn't make it and try to figure out their stories as well. If you try to implement measures aimed only at great whites near beaches, your measures might not be effective against other predatory sharks. And if you conclude that swimmers are better off in the open ocean because sharks seem to only attack near beaches, well, you'd be completely wrong. Survivorship bias crops up all over our lives and impedes us from accurately assessing danger. You can replace dangerous sharks with dangerous cities or dangerous vacation spots, and you can easily see how your picture of a certain location might be skewed based on the experiences of survivors. More survivors can make something seem more dangerous rather than less dangerous because the volume of stories makes them more memorable. If fewer people survive shark attacks, we wouldn't have survivor stories influencing our perception about how dangerous sharks are. In all likelihood, we would attribute some of the ocean deaths that were caused by shark attacks to drowning or other instances like that because it wouldn't occur to us that sharks could be responsible. A lack of visible survivors with memorable stories might mean we view other fields as far safer and easier than they actually are. For example, a field of business where people who experience failures go on to do other things might seem a lot riskier than one where people who fail are too ashamed to talk about it. The failure of tech startups seems to feel like daily news. We don't often, however, hear about the real estate agent who has trouble making sales or who keeps getting outbid on offers. Nor do we hear much about architects who design terrible houses or construction companies who don't complete their projects. Survivorship bias prompts us to associate more risk with industries that exhibit more public failures. But the failures from industries or businesses that aren't shared are equally important. If we focus only on the survivor stories, we might think that being a real estate agent or an architect is safer than starting a technology company. And it might be, we don't really know. But we can't only base our understanding on which career option is the best bet on the widely shared stories of failure. If we don't factor survivorship bias into our thinking, we end up in a classic map is not the territory problem. The survivor stories become a poor navigational tool for the terrain. Most of us know that we shouldn't become a writer based on the results achieved by J.K. Rowling and John Grisham. But even if we go out and talk to other writers or learn about their careers and attend writing seminars given by published authors, we are still only talking to the survivors. So yes, it's super inspiring to know that Stephen King got so many rejections early in his career that the stack of them was enough to pull a nail out of the wall. But what about the writers who got just as many rejections and never published anything? Not only can we learn a lot from them about the publishing industry, but we need to consider their experiences if we want to anticipate and understand the challenges involved in being a writer. So, what can sharks teach us about survivorship bias? They teach us that not recognizing survivorship bias can lead to faulty decision making. We don't see the big picture and end up optimizing for a small slice of reality. However, we can't completely overcome survivorship bias. The best we can do is acknowledge it, and when the stakes are high or the results important, stop and look for the stories of those who were unsuccessful because they have just as much, if not more, to teach us. So the next time you're assessing risk, ask yourself, am I paying too much attention to the great white sharks and not enough to the oceanic white tips?